I like the fact that the only reason that Ford entered Le Mans was because they were having a pissing contest with Ferrari. I mean, there was nothing else to it. They just wanted to be better than Ferrari. Hello brothers and sisters, my name is Daidarius and welcome to the review of Lemans 66, or as it is called in other places, Ford vs Ferrari. So the movie takes place in, guess what, 1966, where Henry Ford II wants to kind of up the sales and appeal to the young buyers who have finally got money after World War II to make sure that they chose them to buy Fords. One of the ways to do that is trying to be inspired by Ferrari, which we know that a lot of young men actually aspires to buy a car like that at some point. And since Ferrari is almost banging up, Ford sends some men over to Ferrari to actually buy them up, and long story short, they get insulted, bring that insult back to Henry Ford, and now he wants to beat them at Le Mans. Now considering that Ford has never built a race car before, they actually hire in Carroll Shelby, who you should know by now considering that all the Shelby cars that they have now started with him, so he's a big deal. Not that he was that big a deal at the time, but you know. So he's going to build a race car for Ford, and to drive it, they're going to ask Ken Miles, who is a 45-year-old mechanic slash race car driver who, you know, doesn't really have much more to give in him. But together they're going to try to build this car who's going to beat Ferrari at Le Mans. And that is basically this 2.5 movies plot summed up. So what did I like about this movie? First of all, the acting is pretty solid. I mean, it is not mind-blowing good, it is not Oscar-worthy, but it is definitely solid. You do really buy Matt Damon's and Christian Bale's characters, and you do feel there is some history there, not only between them, but also some baggage of their earlier life. Just in general, everyone in here actually gives a great performance. Also, the way this movie is shot is not over the top beautiful and well shot, but it is well enough shot that you appreciate what you see on screen, but also gritty enough that it actually drags you down into not only the garage and the mechanics, but also onto the racetrack. And speaking of the racetrack, the races in this movie is excellently shot. You do feel like you're out there racing with them, and also kind of feel like you are in a video game. Kind of hard to explain it, but just in general, the way they shot these races is just very well done. I also like the plot in this movie. I mean, it is a historical biopic with some creative freedom put in here and there for drama's sake. But just the tale is as old as time. You have someone who's now trying to enter this competition thing that someone else is an expert in, and now they are the underdogs, and then you're going to try to do something to beat them at the finals, so to speak. But what I enjoyed most in this movie is when they're trying to build this race car, to change small equipment here and there to ensure that this car can not only drive fucking fast in the straight lines and in the curves, but also make sure that it can last 24 hours of a sprint. There's also some family dynamic in there that you don't really care for, even though I will say that Christian Bale's character's son was, let's say, enjoyable. Often child actors are kind of the downfall of movies, but here they used him sparingly, and when they used him there was actually some kind of payoff for the audience. I will also say that for the most part the pacing is good, but it does diverge at some points in this movie, but I will get back to that later. Also be warned, you will feel the 2.5 hours runtime. Now that doesn't mean you feel like the movie is dragging on, but you do feel like you are using 2.5 hours of your day to watch this movie. And also, if you know history, there won't be much tension in this movie. I mean, you know how it's gonna go with the building of this car, you know it's gonna go at the race, you're also gonna know the history afterwards, but that doesn't mean you can enjoy the movie. I mean, I knew history beforehand, or I knew the main points of the history that this movie was trying to adapt, so I wasn't surprised at those aspects of the movie, and the movie wasn't as tense for me personally. However, this movie still delivered a lot of surprising points besides those things, which again made it worth watching for me. Now with that being said, not everything is good in this movie. I mean, first of all, the CGI in this movie is very, very wonky. Sometimes it is actually very good, especially when the Le Mans race is gonna start and you see the I won't say stadium, but the whole audience sections at the finishing line in the beginning of the movie where Christian Bale walks out from the garage is very well composed. But on the other hand, when cars crash, it just looks god awful. I mean, it is horrendous. And just throughout the movie, you have these classic good CGI and very poor CGI just mixed together in a not so delicious bag. And then there's the fact that this movie is not really focused. It wants to cover too much, so it just keep losing focus of what really matters, with this, that they are trying to build this car. They have never done race before. They're trying to build this car. Ferrari knows what they're doing because they have won the past 4 or 5 Le Mans at that point. But it also wants to focus on the family life. It also wants to focus on Shelby and what he wants to accomplish. It also wants to focus on what Henry Ford himself wants to do, and also his senior director or something. I can't remember the title. He's kind of the second bad guy in this movie. And then it wants to focus on the race, and also it wants to focus on what the race means. It wants to focus on too many things that it just loses the focus and heart of the main story, and also the secondary stories. And that's not only the plot points, also John Berthel's character is very prominent in the beginning of this movie. I mean, the first, maybe let's say 20 minutes, half an hour of this movie, he's very important to the story. And then they just drop him until we get to the race, and even there he is not that important for the story. And it does a lot of that with these characters. Also the fact that Ferrari is supposed to be the main bad guy, and I use quotation for bad guy here because he's not evil. It is just that he is the one they have to overcome. But you don't really feel his presence in the movie. I mean, you feel it in the beginning and you kind of feel it at the end, but in between you don't really care about him. That's also the fact that when the movie ends, it is in a rush to end it, and then once they've done that, it pulls the brakes, then it goes very, very slow after the ending to end it once again. So the movie ends and then it goes on for like 10 or 15 minutes more because it needs to end a second time, I guess. And this just means that the pacing in this movie is very on and off. Every time they're working on the car, you are just eating it raw. It is very, very interesting to see, and you just enjoy the hell out of it. Whereas when it's focused on anything else, you're kind of bored. I mean, not really, but you do get anxious to just get back to the main thing. You don't really care about these other plot points, which means, again, you definitely feel these 2.5 hours going by, especially the last 20 minutes. Now it might seem that I'm bashing hard on this movie, but it's just that these things really stood out because everything else in this movie is so well done. Now I don't know if they're kind of Oscar baiting at this point because the acting wasn't Oscar worthy, and I mean it is a biopic and often they are kind of Oscar baity, but this movie is definitely worth watching if you like either cars, big races, underdog stories, quotation mark, this is for it, I mean, or maybe just the mechanical side of cars. However, do be warned that it focuses on a lot of other things and it takes it a long time to actually get to the point, which is building this race car. There is a big running start until we get to that point, so yeah, this movie would have benefited a lot if it just trimmed off the unnecessary fat and actually focused the movie a bit more. However, I will say though that Le Mans 66 or Ford versus Ferrari, it is worth watching in cinema. Entertainment guaranteed. So, Le Mans 66 - Ford versus Ferrari, have you seen it? What do you think about it, and what is your favorite race car movie? Now, some may say Days of Thunder, good choice. Others might say Driven, again, good choice. But I'm gonna go the unusual way and said Speed Racer from the Wachowski brothers, or I guess now they're called the Wachowski sisters. They were the brothers at the time of the Wachowskis, let's just make it easy. The Wachowskis. I believe that is a criminally underrated movie because it is anime in movie format, and I actually think they managed to pull it off, but that's just me. But whatever you think, comment below with me your thoughts. And as always, until I see you in the next video, remember to stay awesome. Bye! Alright, let's try to drive 24 hours straight on second hand. It's not